Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Motor City Mad Mouse Show. Yes, I am the Motor City Mad Mouse Scott Morgan Rock. Glad to have a guy that I have so much respect for, and I view this guy as a veteran in more ways than one. His name is Steve Balestrieri. Steve, welcome to the Motor City Mad Mouse Show.
It's my friend. It's been way too long. I apologize for my forced absence here, but all the best to you and Miss Candy because you guys are aces in my book.
Well, you're an ace in my book. Well, I'm sure we'll have more shows planned as time goes on. Everybody needs a break from this business. It drives everybody wacko. But, the reality is you and I, to me, we've been at this a long time, and I'm glad to have you tonight and definitely looking forward to other projects as time progresses. And just so everybody know out there that Candy and I and the South Florida Tribune have been approved for the NFL draft in Detroit. So just want to make that announcement while Steve is on here. So, Steve, let's go ahead. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about the New England Patriots, but I want to focus on something much, much bigger than that. And that's your military background. So let's talk about it. And what are you the most proud of? And then the second part of that question, explain to the audience the places that you've traveled.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the plug on my military career. I was a soldier in the 7th Special Forces Group. Most people knew us as Army Green Berets. I spent 17 and a half years in before I got hurt and they put me out to pasture. The Special Forces training that we went through was some of the toughest in the military. And, we were deployed depending on our area orientation. Each of the different Special Forces groups had an area of orientation and they would send you to language school. This was in the era before, all the stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan just got everybody involved. So they sent me to school to learn Spanish. So my area of operations was Latin America. And I've been to virtually every country south of the border.
Okay.
Yeah, all the way down to the tip of, Chile and Argentina. I mean, all the way down to the bottom of the continent. So I've been to nearly every country down there. It was a fascinating time because back then that was, when all the drug wars were going on. So we spent a lot of time in Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru.
So D-Lowe's wants to thank you for your service, Steve, and watch his chat room get going. Good evening, Steve from D-Lowe's. So you're going to see these guys. And when I bring a person on you, these guys love to salute. You'll definitely hit it off with these guys. They're salute big time. But one thing about these guys is they're great people. But they're very smart, too, these guys, when they come in. And D-Lowe's is certainly arguably one of the best ones that I've seen out there. He's very sincere, but he knows what he's talking about. But yeah, so when we talk about your military career, were there any types of lingering effects health-wise that ended up hitting you later on?
Oh, well, ever since the day they put me out, I got hurt down in South America. They brought me back up to Walter Reed Hospital for surgery, and, it ended up forcing me out. So I've been living with constant pain since that time. And, I've been treated for PTSD, like probably 90% of the veterans who get out. And there's other aches and pains related to military service. I mean, when you're jumping out of airplanes and, carrying 90 pounds of lightweight gear, as they put it, on your body, it hurts your back, your shoulders, your knees. And I'm no exception to that.
That's all right. Hey, listen, it didn't affect your ability to talk. You're doing really good. All right. Hey, listen.
Well, that's always open for debate, Scott, right?
I don't know. I mean, we're talking, right? Obviously, you don't have anything that impedes the vocal cords. And when the time comes that it impedes my vocal cords, I'm going broke personally. But, we need a microphone. Sticks and stone may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But I'll tell you, if I lose that microphone problem, that may hurt me too. Yeah. I always look at let me tell you, you talk about Spanish. I want to tell you a funny story that happened Saturday night. Okay. over at Chase Stadium with Inter Miami. Have you ever been to a press conference ever in your media career? And we'll talk about the Patriots later, where you had an all post game press conference speaking Spanish only.
Never in media, but I've been to press conferences, uh, overseas where maybe the president of such and such a country was talking, and
Right.
yeah, all of those were in Spanish, and my
But I'm
Spanish is
talking media, pal. Media after a soccer game in South Florida, all Spanish.
that's
Seriously.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's safe to say we
You
did
see,
put the
your Spanish improved by the time you left there, though, right?
no, as a matter of fact, I didn't know anything about Spanish. I would have wished I would have taken it as a second language. And when I see those classy PR people, Rafa Cabrera and Molly Dreska, who hadn't seen me in a year and a half because I've been sick myself, and they were glad they treated me great. We're just glad you have you back here. But
Yeah.
I said, Rafa, what's the deal? I couldn't get the question here. He said, don't worry. I mean, we did the whole thing in Spanish, but you could have done it upstairs. But well, that shows you what being away a year and a half of me. I said, no big deal. I mean, this is so I decided when I see these people again, I said, I'll write a story throwing myself under the bus because I didn't have Spanish for a second language. So, and I should have known better because when I was covering the Miami Marlins at the beginning and we were doing these Zoom calls, half the, at least in this situation, was half Spanish and half American. And I didn't know how many great quotes I was missing because of the Spanish side. But this was the first. And I decided, this is just too good not to write up. And I did. You always have to make light of it. Morris had 9 lives. I have to make the most of what I have. And obviously, I take a licking and keep on talking. Unlike the roll Timex, it takes a licking and keep on ticking. All right, we'll leave that. Watch analogies. I will go one more military question. Do you think that we'll ever see another Pat Tillman? I mean, here's a guy that played football, gave up an awful lot of money, and unfortunately passed away serving his country. The most unselfish person on the planet. The Cardinals have a statue of him outside their building in Arizona. But the most selfless individual to me is Pat Tillman, and you can never honor him enough.
Yeah, I would imagine that, if the situation avails itself again, we'll have other guys that will step up to the plate and serve their country. Pat gave up $1 million contract,
Right.
to join the military, and I can tell you that enlisted guys don't make that kind of money. So,
Right.
Interesting story about Pat. He met just before his last tour. He met with Bill Belichick, and Belichick didn't know what his plans were after, he was due to come home from his last tour in Afghanistan. But he said, if, whatever your plans are, I have a job for you when you come home.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Very nice. All right. Well, good transition. Good segue. So we talked about Bill Belichick. What's been life like after Bill Belichick for the Patriots?
Yeah, it's weird because for nearly 25 years, a quarter of a century, right?
Right.
Belichick's been that one constant down there, and now, Gerard Mayo's taken over. Now, Mayo was a really good football player. Then he came to coaching. He's been really widely recognized as an up and coming coach in NFL ranks. And originally they kept him from the Panthers, I believe, last year because he was going to take a gig with the Panthers. But, they said, hey, we'd like you to stay. We'll give you a bump in pay because eventually when Bill does retire, we want you to take over. Well, because of what happened in 2023, Bill didn't get a chance to retire. He was ushered out the door, and now Mayo has taken over. But, the first reactions we've gotten from the players this week, because they have a new, whole new coaching staff in place, they were allowed to start their off-season activities early. So they were back in the building on Monday. Hunter Henry, Jabril Peppers were the guys that were elected to speak with the media, and they were both raving about Mayo. They're looking forward to playing with him, or for him, I should say. So he has a lot of respect in the building with the players. It's just really different not seeing Bill out there. I mean, that 25 years, 24, that's a really long time.
So, what was your relationship like with Bill Belichick, Steve?
I didn't really have a relationship with him. I mean, I would, when I was down there at Gillette, I would sit right in front for all his press conferences because, it's like you're listening to one of the masters speak. And a lot of people complain that he doesn't give, very long or detailed answers to stuff, which, it got to the point where, and the guys who are down there more than myself, they would always say, you have to read between the tea leaves with Bill.
Right.
But when you would get somebody asking him a question of how it related to NFL history, then it was time to sit back in your seat and listen, and it would be amazing. He could talk NFL history for hours at a time, and some of the stuff he would tell you is just mind-blowing. He talked about key games, and he can give you down and distance, the time left in a certain quarter, and he'd be talking about certain players and what formations they were running. I mean, he was a true student of the game. He still is. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I never really thought, Bill knew who I was. I mean, because there's so many guys, especially during the Brady years, there was so many media people there. And then, after practice one day, I was slated to talk to one of the other, younger players. I had asked to speak to a young tight end that was coming in. So he was coming off the field, and I had kind of walked to the side so him and I could talk one-on-one. And Bill was going back down the stairs toward the locker rooms. And I just said, "Hey, good afternoon, coach." And he's like, "Steven, how are you?" So I was like, "Okay." I mean, I got to ask him questions and stuff like that, but I didn't think, he knew who I was. So that was kind of eye-opening because, he obviously would speak to the Bob Sossis, Tom Curran, guys like that, Mike Reese, the guys who had been long established there, Karen Garigian from the Boston. Well, she was with the Boston Herald. Now she's in Mass Live. Bill had a lot of respect for her, and he would always be very polite to Karen.
All right, let's go to the chat room real quick. Joshua Door, what's going on, Steve?
Josh, how are you?
All right,
and it's good to be seen here.
Is
Jabril Peppers related to Dottie Pepper? No.
Okay, there you go, Joshua. All right, well, with that said, we talked about Belichick. Did you ever get to know Jared Mayo pretty well?
Gerard Mayo? Yeah, I mean, when he was a player, he was very vocal. He was a leader on the field, and during practice, I mean, it would get really competitive out there. Like Brady, and you and I have talked about this so many times. Brady was uber competitive, and even in practice, I mean, if he threw an incomplete pass where he was off the mark, he would get mad. And of course, Mayo would just fire him up because then they'd get the defense all fired up, and there was so much trash talk in there. And Gerard was always, but when it came to the media guys, you talk to him, he was always so on point. He was very well spoken, extremely intelligent guy, and super nice guy. I don't know if you've seen any of his press conferences since he took over the head coaching gig now, and he's just that. what you're seeing there is who he is. That's
Okay.
who he is. There's no, different side of him. Sure, as a coach, he'll be able to bust chops on the guys when they're doing something wrong, but he's a very positive, influence on the players, and I think they relate to him extremely well because he played for Belichick on this team for 8 years, and he was an excellent football player.
So what kind of a job do you think he's going to do there? It's one thing to follow a legend, but it's another when you follow a legend who struggled on the way out. I've seen
Yeah.
it so many different times, but some reason or another, I get the feeling he's on house money here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big unknown, right? He has a whole new staff. He was a really good defensive coach. I mean, him and Steve Belichick were I guess you could call them de facto defensive coordinators. Bill was never won much on titles. So, and because of the NFL rules where, the coordinators had to speak to the media, Bill would take that onus off of the guys. That's why a lot of times they didn't have, a named offensive coordinator. They didn't have a named defensive coordinator. Bill would take the heat off those guys. And if there was any complaints or, people wanted to nitpick about stuff, he'd put it on himself. So
I don't like that.
he's a smart dude, man. And, the players raved about his knowledge of the system. I would imagine defensively, they're going to keep a lot of those same philosophies in place because it worked. I mean, even though they were 4-13 last year, their defense was good, and it kept them in every game but about 2 or 3.
Okay. All right, let's turn over to Candy for a moment.
Miss Candy.
Good evening, everybody. If you see that red subscribe button, hit it, like us, share us to all of your peeps. Monday nights, we talk baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football. Wednesday nights, we have interviews. And then we talk all kinds of sports on the Sports Exchange. Anything from golf to NFL to NBA to NHL to MLB to even cornhole. Imagine that. Thursday nights, you never know what we're going to talk about. It's called Fire Up, and it's called Pundits Pundit. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can hear us on iHeartRadio, Google, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. Please go to our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You can see where Scott writes. We have many other writers, and I actually take some photography. So go check out the pictures. If you want to sponsor a show, call Scott, 954-304-4941. The other thing Scott did, he wrote a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and Apple Books. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Candy. She does a wonderful job with the videos as well. You'd be surprised how popular those videos are on YouTube. It's unbelievable.
And see, now I'm friends with the author. So there.
Well, thank you very much. Well, guess what? You're in it. I don't forget about people like you, pal. All right, so let's talk about Mac Jones trading to Jacksonville. Let's face the reality, this guy was destined to fail, not because of any fault of his own. They got off to a decent start with Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. Boy, you had Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, and then they tried to save the situation with Bill O'Brien. What happened to Mac Jones?
It was a combination of things, and Mac would tell you the same thing. Part of it was himself, because they were in such dire straits with, especially last year. The offensive line was a walking infirmary unit. I mean, so the protection was horrid last year. The run blocking was horrid. So when you can't run the ball and you can't protect your quarterback and your wide receivers are, to put it mildly, struggling,
Mhm.
He was trying to do too much. He was trying to force the issue too much. He made some really terrible decisions. And, it just snowballed, and his confidence, you could see by the middle of the year, his confidence was shot.
Wow.
If you watch the tape of his rookie year, I mean, they won 10 games. They made it to the playoffs. We got annihilated by Buffalo. But the fact that, 2 years after Brady was gone, they're back in the playoffs. I mean, things were looking pretty good. And then McDaniels left for the Raiders. And I think it really took them by surprise because they didn't have a plan in effect. And Belichick elected to go with, Matty P and Joe Judge. And to say it was a disaster is putting it lightly. I mean, we heard reports after the fact that, right at the beginning of like mini camps and training camp, offensive linemen were asking questions about protections and, what are we going to do if a team does this? And they didn't have answers for it. And some of the players said they were shocked because they didn't have an answer for what is a legitimate question. How are we going to handle this? And it showed itself on the field. And it affected Mac Jones. I mean, and, the bottom line is their wide receivers last year were not an imposing bunch. I mean, you look at it, Juju severely underperformed. I think he ended up with 239 yards receiving.
Wow.
After Jacoby Myers was, pretty much a 700-800 yard guy, and they had him. Kendrick Bourne at the end of Mac's rookie season. Kendrick Bourne was their go-to guy. I mean, he was making explosive plays all over the field. Him and Mac got on a really nice chemistry going. And then the beginning of that year with Patricia, Kendrick Bourne was late for a meeting, and he stayed in the doghouse for the entire season.
Wow.
And every time they put him on the field, like they'd be in a game, they start falling way behind. They'd put Bourne in for a series, and with him and Jacoby Myers, now they're not world beaters, but they gave Mac some viable targets. They would go down and score, and then they take Bourne right out of the game again. And I blame that on Patricia, because how long are you going to keep a guy in the doghouse? Since that incident happened in in training camp last year, Bourne came in. He was in great shape. He was off to a really good start. And then he was hurt, out for the year. With Juju, his knees, I think his knees are shot, honestly. He was underperforming. Devontae Parker, he's not an X that you want to rely on. And they were forced to rely on the rookie, Demario Douglas. And,
wow.
That just it really, really was ugly to watch. And it affected Jones. And by mid-season, you could see his confidence was completely shot.
Yeah.
So I think this move going to, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think this was a really good move for him. He's going to be with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. So you know what? He'll, unless Lawrence gets hurt, Mac won't see the field this year. Maybe some mop-up duty here and there. But it will give him time to get his head back on straight, get his confidence going, which I think Peterson will be great for that.
Right.
And, then he'll, he'll have a shot at being a good career backup, or somebody might take a shot at him if he gets some, playing time in the situation where Lawrence may get dinged up. But I think that was the best thing to happen to him. Because I was a Mac Jones guy. I loved what I saw, that rookie season, at the beginning of that rookie season Josh McDaniels kind of had the training wheels on. He didn't want to put too much on his plate. He wanted him to, to find a comfort level. And then as the season went on, he kept getting better and better, and they went on a long winning streak there, and made the playoffs. So I think it's going to be good for Mac.
Well, the truth of the matter is, you said Jacksonville's his hometown. We all know that Josh McDaniels, heck of a coordinator, not a very good head coach. Bill O'Brien, they tried to do what they could to bring his old coach in for Alabama. Unfortunately, there were just too many. That was way beyond his control to be able to fix that situation.
That's the one that's on Bill, because O'Brien was under the impression that he was going to be able to bring all of his own offensive coaches in. And Belichick only allowed him to bring one guy. And so that kind of put Bill O'Brien behind the 8 ball. But as we know, O'Brien's a great offensive coordinator. And he's been a successful head coach, too, down in Houston. And, say what you will about McDaniels being an awful head coach, but he was always an outstanding offensive coordinator.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, look at it this way with O'Brien, though. The guy's going to go up the street, and what is he going to coach Boston College now?
Yeah.
So, and the worst thing in the world, not like he had to leave the state of Massachusetts, which isn't very big in the first place.
Yeah,
to get another gig nearby.
Yeah. I mean, he only went 20 minutes up the road. So
is that what it is? I knew it was close. Yeah, the traffic, unbelievable. So no, I'm with you. And what about Bailey Zappi though? I mean, he's still there, but we know that as we lead to our next thing, NFL draft plans. Let's talk about the Patriots draft plans. I know a quarterback certainly is one of the things they're looking into.
Yeah. Well, first with Zappi.
Yeah.
Him and Mac Jones didn't get along from day one.
Really?
And depending on who you talk to or what, you're hearing from behind the scenes, some say it was Mac, some say it was Zappi. I know Zappi is uber competitive, and he said right off the bat in his rookie year that he didn't consider himself the backup quarterback. So read with that what you will. But he's not the answer. He's a career backup at best. Honestly, I think for the third quarterback position this year, he'll have a tough time beating out Nathan Rourke, the kid from the CFL.
Well, I agree. Yeah, I know that Jacksonville, I think they let a good one get away with Nathan Rourke. I really do.
Yeah. So that play he made in preseason last year was literally insane.
Yeah.
Where he almost got sacked like 4 times and then threw a long touchdown. But anyway, I think he's going to surprise some people. Not saying he's going to compete for the starting job, but I think he's going to, in my opinion, and this is before they take the field, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think he'll be the third quarterback this year.
Yeah, well, amazingly enough, though, when you look at the Patriots, they certainly found a way. How do you ruin a quarterback? Well, they did, okay, because I know that Mac Jones came from the Nick Saban, and let's face the reality. I realize some Alabama quarterbacks aren't exceptional starters, but some of them aren't bad either. But if you're looking for a way to ruin a quarterback, they did exactly that. And hopefully he'll resurrect. But the thing about Bailey Zappi, though, Steve, I saw him play in college at Western Kentucky because they're playing against Florida Atlantic a few times. It ran up numbers like you wouldn't believe, but few people realize, though, that when you come to the NFL from college, I don't care how many numbers you run up. The competition's different depending on the conference you're in, the competition. And Bailey Zappi, to me, I thought it was the number 3. I thought he could be the steal, but then when I'm hearing what you're telling me right now, you're right. Maybe he is a career back. A couple other questions I want to get to, obviously. Just to let everybody know, the Sports Exchange will air tonight around 9 o'clock Eastern time as well. My name is Scott Morganroth. This is Motor City Madmouth Show. Please be joined by my Steve Balestrieri, writes for fans.com. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct.
So
been with them this July at training camp will be my 13th year for them.
Great stuff. Well, I'll tell you what. So I definitely have the authority here on New England Patriots football. So let's talk about Bill Belichick. He didn't get another job this year. And you know what? When December came around, okay, what was the real reason that he never got another job? Because I know he wants to chase Don Shula's record.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that a couple of teams that maybe were on the cusp of competing for a Super Bowl didn't reach out to him because, as you know, I mean, if Bill was to go to a team, I'm just going to use this as an example, the Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
I would think the Cowboys would get a lot deeper in the playoffs because, he can coach up a defense. Now, I think Dallas's defense is much more talented than the Patriots, so I would think that he would have done a really good job on that side of the football, and it takes some of the pressure off your offense because they're not having to put up 30 points every week to win. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not saying Dallas was giving up that much, but I'm just using that as an example because I thought Mike McCarthy would have been out the door this spring, but they opted to keep him around. And maybe, Jerry Jones didn't want Bill in there because, as we know, Bill is a very hands-on type of guy, and he doesn't want the owner telling him what to do on the field. So, but I was surprised Bill didn't get another shot. I was thinking Dallas, and we heard about Atlanta, and it seemed like he was going to go to Atlanta. Then they decided to, go for a younger guy, and Raheem Morris. So, I'm surprised, and I wonder if anyone's going to, offer him a job next year, because now he's getting up there. He's like 71 years old,
right?
So it's going to be tough for him.
So with that said, when do you think the decision was really made to let Belichick go? I know that the Indianapolis game out overseas probably is what I've been hearing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what we heard too. I mean, they had cameras on the ownership and they were reading lips, and I know that the ownership was really disappointed that they lost that game over in Germany.
Yeah. Okay. All right. One other question here. Let's talk about the handling of Tom Brady's departure. Did that expedite Belichick's departure? Knowing Robert Kraft, you told me he's been mad that Tom Brady was handled that poorly. We know that Belichick used to like to get people a little bit before, but this is a one time he didn't want to do it, knowing full well that his records without Tom Brady, I think they were like 10 games under 500 without Brady there, and then with Brady. So we all know that Brady certainly was a straw that you were able to drink out of. But
yeah, and a funny thing with that is, I had spoken. Well, we saw Tom in that 2019 summer, just before he left, the summer before he left. And, the rumors were that the Patriots were going to give him a 3-year deal, kind of like what Drew Brees was getting at that time, if you remember, because that's what he wanted. And he wanted to retire a Patriot. And I had talked to one of Tom's friends, and he told me that it wasn't Belichick who pulled the plug on it. It was Kraft. Really? And that we learned later that Kraft made Bill the bad guy by saying, well, you tell Tom we're going year to year and you're going to have to break the news to him.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And that came out this year, that news about that. So, we had heard about that. And, the Krafts, I firmly believe that they didn't think Tom would leave. But if you saw Tom that summer of 2019, he was always spot on. Of course, he's all business on the football field, even in practice. But he was downright surly and mad that summer. and you could sense that something was really amiss with that. And that's when he decided, that's it, I'm out of here. And he played out that season. They made the playoffs, but they lost in the wild card game.
Right.
And, then he said he was going down to Tampa, and of course we know what happened the first year there. They won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So, but the Krafts they've laid a lot of this at the feet of Belichick. And I don't know if you've had a chance to watch. There was a series on Apple TV called The Dynasty.
Right.
And I was really shocked, because this is, kind of like, The Last Dance, or, the Chicago Bulls, docuseries that was.
Right.
This was so negative. It was like, I don't know why they called it The Dynasty, because everything was negative in it, and they tried to lay everything at Belichick's feet. And Robert Kraft took a big hit from the fan base, because, Kraft, everything that went right, he was taking his bows for. Everything that went wrong in those 20 years, he was putting on Bill. And that resonated with fan base, because they were like, hey, you don't go to 9 Super Bowls in 18 years without Bill Belichick behind, on the bench.
Yeah.
And I mean, think about that, how hard it is to get to 1 or 2 Super Bowls. They went to 9 in 18 years, which is basically every other season.
Or 50%.
Yeah. You're going every other season to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And, they won 6, but they won to 9. And it's, they don't do that. I mean, as great as Tom was, everyone wants to say, was it Brady or was it Bill? I think it's unfair to the players that they had and to the other coaches, because it was both of them. And Bill was really painted in a bad light. And a lot of the fan base was quite upset about that.
Well, if it wasn't for the fact that you had 2 miracle catches, they'd probably have 8 instead of 6.
Yeah.
With the Giants. So with that,
the Mario Manningham catch still gives me nightmares.
Yeah. And what about the other one? You had Manningham.
I mean, that other throw that Eli Manning made, I'm trying to remember who that was down the sideline.
Me too.
But that was such a great throw. That was an absolute dime. And, hats off to Eli. I mean, he played, down in the stretch in both of those Super Bowls. He was fantastic. So, all right. What was your relationship like with Tom Brady? I'm sure you got to know him pretty well over 13 years. Yeah, Tom, he was just an awesome guy. I mean, again, he was always well-spoken. He was always very polite, even when there were times when he didn't want to be. You could tell, but he was always very polite, just a really nice guy. And, he had that TB12 clinic, up in Gillette. He had another one in Boston at the time. And I had heard through the grapevine that, there was Green Berets coming home from Afghanistan that were, really banged up badly. And Tom was taking them to his clinic and treating them for free. Wow. So at that time, as you knew, I was writing for several military websites. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to Tom and Alex Guerrero, and I said, I would like to do a story on the TB12 clinic, because I know you're treating guys who were injured, but how would it work, that their philosophy, how would it work of preparing soldiers to go overseas? So they agreed to let me in the building, and with the stipulation that I go through the therapy that Tom went through. And I'm here to tell you, when Tom talks about lengthening and softening muscles, that was some of the most painful stuff I've ever felt in my life.
Well, it seems like one of the most painless things that ever happened was the fact that Tom Brady would always take pay cuts to make sure that you had good
You're
players
right.
around him. He
But
really did.
speaking about my relationship with Tom, I wrote this article, and then on Tom's Instagram,
Uh-huh.
he put on there, this was a great article.
Wow.
And that's always been my little pat on the back to myself.
Wow.
Because I tell some of the other guys when I see him, did Tom ever tell you you wrote a great article?
Well, every now and then somebody like that will. I'll never forget when I did a story on Jack Kemp, where his secretary sent me a nice thank because I was talking about not only Congressman Kemp's career, but what he did with the youth. So some of these people will reach out to you and show their appreciation. And my final question of the night before we go to your contact information is this: he goes to Tampa, Bruce Arians, and all that. I once told you with Tom Corrin that I thought he was going to come back, and you guys didn't believe me, and I was right.
Yeah,
Okay, remember that show? And
I do. I
gotta
do.
love Tommy. But what were your thoughts about Tom going to Tampa? Do you think it was more to prove the Patriots wrong, or to prove that he was a lot that you gave up on me a little earlier? Because I know there's a lot of different ways. I'm going to prove you wrong. I can still win. That it was me and not you. And lo and behold, Bruce Arians let him do whatever he want. What Bruce Arians did to Tom Brady was what Don Shula did to Dan Marino. Do whatever you want, just win. Of course, we know
That's it.
Marino didn't win it
And
all, but Brady
I think
did.
he was very bitter after 20 years with New England to
Mhm.
be forced out the door
Yeah,
because they're telling you, and there was no drop off in his play. There was drop off in the players around him in that last year.
right.
In 2019, there was a big drop off. They weren't the same team at that point, and they were kind of leaking out. Oh, well, you can see the decline in Tom's game. I heard that a lot in 2019. I heard it a lot. Well, you can see the decline. And I'm like, I don't see any decline in his game.
Right.
And then he went to Tampa and he threw for, what was it, 40 something touchdowns, and they won a Super Bowl. So I don't know. Was that a big decline? It wasn't to me.
Well, if it was a decline for you and me, then somehow, some way, we either took dumb pills and forgot what football was about, or we're suffering from a disease, by the way, that I made up called dementia, spelled DUMBMENTIA. If you wonder if it's a D, no, I made it up. I take words and letters, whatever I want, to try to define what we're really attempting to really reach out there. So no, I mean Tom Brady, hey, he's a Michigan guy for crying out loud. The Wolverines won the national championship. And again, they have the most wins in Division One history to begin with. And the fact that Michigan guy, okay, has won more Super Bowls, the Wolverines won more games, and of course, look what he's done. A Michigan guy has won that many. Unbelievable. Michigan's not so bad, but with all due respect, Steve, I've always thought so much of you, anyways. And when it comes to the Patriots, this is a franchise that you've been around for a long time. And if anybody knows a pulse of what you're doing is one thing. So really, what are you more proud of? Your military career or what you did afterwards by being able to write sports for unquestionably one of the best organizations on the planet? Because the Patriots have a remarkable history.
Yeah, I think the military still stands tall for me. I mean, um, and my wife would be the first to tell you, she's like, what you're doing down there is not a job because you would do it for free. And if they
Right.
just let you in the door. And I said, that's absolutely true. I would do it for free. So, but I grew up being a Patriots fan up there. And then after the military, I lived in the South for a while, but then moved back up there, and I lucked into a great gig. Like I said, I'll be in July this year. Will be my 13th season. Started my 13th season writing for Pats fans. Ian Logue, the guy who owns and runs the place up there, he's been a good friend of me for all these years, and it's been so much fun. Because as a kid growing up, they weren't very good. They had some times where they were, right there on the cusp. They went to a couple of Super Bowls, but lost both of them. But to see Bill Belichick come in and just year after year, they were just a powerhouse. It was so much fun. Now it's really intriguing because I'm excited. I didn't want to see Bill go, but now Gerard Mayo, they just made the decision to move on. And I like Mayo. I liked him as a coach. I was looking forward to him getting a shot. Now, you have to embrace it. As much as we didn't want to see Bill go, we're excited. They might not be very good this year again, but it's, what? I just want to see him build it from the ground up again.
There you go. Rocket scientist. Want to say good evening, Steve. He's another one of our heavy contributors. So, Steve, so glad to have you on the broadcast tonight. I know we'll have other projects that we're going to work on. One of the things we're going to work on down the line will be Bob Sochi, the play-by-play announcer. I know he wasn't available tonight, but this was a good opportunity for you and I to
Bob's
go out there and be able to reminisce, but still talk Patriots football, especially as the draft is coming up in about 2 weeks. So the South Florida Tribune will be over in Detroit, my hometown, covering the NFL draft. I'm sorry, anything you want to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, real quick, a little anecdote about Belichick and with Bob Sochi, the guy you mentioned. Bob's the radio play-by-play guy, super guy, super nice guy. You met him, and whenever I was down there, I would sit. A lot of times, I would sit next to Bob, and we'd sit up near the front where Bill was, and I'd always make a joke. I'm going to ask Bill when we're going to get an Army guy on the team, because Bill's such a Navy guy. And he joked around. He's like, I'll never have an Army guy. So I used to wear my Army Special Forces hat in there, and I'd sit there and I'd whisper to Bob, I'm going to ask him. And he said, don't do it. You'll be that guy where, Bill gives the long 10-second stare. So this one day, Bill was in a really good mood, and he was joking around with the media, which wasn't very often. But he was just having a good time. And I said to Bob, I'm going to ask him. So Bill said, any more questions? And he was dead on looking at me. And I just pointed at my hat, and Bill smiled and said, we're done here.
There you go. I'm glad you got that. So, well, hey, Bob told you, but you know what? At least he did it in a way where it sounds like to me joked around about it a little bit.
Yeah, it was, and we laughed, when we walked outside about that. But it is what it is. I'm really looking forward to the draft. I like the kid from North Carolina, Drake May. I'm hoping he's going to be the guy for the Patriots. But Jaden Daniels is really good too, and we're hearing rumors about McCarthy, that Michigan kid. So who knows? Nobody knows what's going on right now.
Wouldn't it be perfect synergy if J.J. McCarthy lands in New England to replace another Michigan? Tom Brady. I don't know. If it makes sense, it could happen, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, those stories will write themselves.
Yeah, they will. We'll know in the next couple of weeks. So as I mentioned, the South Florida Tribune will be in my hometown of Detroit covering it as well. So with that said, Candy, why don't you come on real quick and everybody know to get the book, and then we'll let Steve be able to identify himself. And then we get the Sports Exchange at 9:00 p.m. Eastern time. Hope you can join us. Go ahead, Candy.
If you see that red subscribe button, click it, like us, share us, tell all your friends about us. We do baseball on Mondays, football on Tuesdays, all sports Wednesday night, and we do an interview show, which is what you're listening to currently. On Thursday nights, we have Fire Up and Pundits Pundit. You never know what you might be talking about on those shows. Tune in to any of our shows, all of our shows, podcasts. If you'd like to listen to the audio version, we do that too. iHeartRadio, Google, Apple, Spotify, Castbox, Deezer, Geo7, wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find us. Go to our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You will see the writings of Scott Morganroth and others, including transcripts of the Dolphins, the Jaguars, and the Detroit Lions, and NFL, and Major League Baseball, the Marlins, and more and more in some of the colleges like FAU and USF and the Miami Hurricanes and the Gators. If you want to advertise or sponsor a show, call Scott 954-304-4941. If you have comments or show ideas that you want us to, or topics you want us to cover, if you are not in the chat room, you should be, but you can also email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And last but not least, Scott wrote a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It talks about how media has changed over his 40 plus years in the industry. He has a picture of himself and a young Muhammad Ali. Buy the book to see the picture. Okay, Scott.
All right, one other media distribution partner I should mention, but we only have it for football, Florida State. So we try to get a lot of the big schools in Florida. Everybody knows
You're the
that.
busiest man in the media, man.
Well, we try anyways. Hey, listen, when you go to the NFL draft, you realize how many Florida kids get taken. And I see that we have Florida State, USF, even UCF for that matter, Florida Atlantic, Miami, Florida, you name it, they're there. Don't be surprised how many Florida kids can actually go out there and do some unbelievable things. In fact, I'll never forget, before we wrap things up here, that Brandon Powell, I'll never forget, from Deerfield Beach High School, was an undrafted free agent, made the Lions with an exceptional training camp. And of course, now he's a Super Bowl ring with the Rams, and he's been moving around. But it just goes to show you. So with that said, Steve, as our customary procedure goes, why don't you let everybody know how to get a hold of you?
Yes. You can find me on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, all the social media sites, Steve Balestrieri, and I write for PatsFans.com. And I just wanted to say, folks, buy that book. I love you, man, because it's been too long.
I love you. Well, the best part about you is you're only across 75, 90 minutes away. It don't matter. And by the way, I won't come empty-handed. I don't know what we're going to eat, but there's a book waiting for you. And what am I? The only thing is, you were going to take another picture with me holding the book, or you holding the book, and me just shaking your hand like they all do when they get it from me. So I love you, Steve. You're to me like a brother. And it's just so great when you have an opportunity to meet colleagues that are as classy as you are. And again, now that you've had a chance to kind of hold your breath and take a breath, fresh air, now maybe we'll do some projects here and there and get you back out there in front of what you love to do, and that's talk to people. So what a treat it's been tonight on the Motor City Madmouth. My name is Scott Morgan, the Motor City Madmouth, with Steve Balestrieri, who's a legend in his own way, but I don't mean it just so much as a writer, but as a military people. Folks, if you can't appreciate a military person that has served their country, which I know a lot of people can do, this guy, to me, it is a veteran in more ways than one, but more importantly, he's one of the biggest hearts, and you can learn a lot about what this guy, and him and I have both had to adapt to old media and new media. And let's not kid ourselves, Steve, things have changed with the communications departments, haven't they, and how we are able to do our jobs.
That's a fact. I mean, we're just trying to keep up,
Yeah.
Well, you and Candy do a great job, and you guys are like I said, aces in my book, and I really appreciate you having me on. And let's not wait as long to do it again.
Well, we won't. Don't worry. You get a hold of Bob Sochi, we'll be doing this sooner than you can snap your hand. But more importantly, I am going to get over to your neck of the woods real soon after all this chaos is done, somewhere around May, and we're going to get together. I'm going to get you that book, and we're going to hang out. So meanwhile, that concludes this edition of the Motor City Madmouth Show. My name is Scott Morgan, once again with Steve Balestrieri. My book out there, Lessons from the Microphone. Basically, when you sum up old school media versus new school media, and a whole lot more. Anybody can learn from it, whether you're learning about the media or you've been in it. Doesn't matter. It changes, and I'll be writing a second part of it later in the year. So, Steve, we'll be doing this again soon, and of course we'll get together sooner. So, just so you know, folks, Sports Exchange, top of the hour. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you on another edition of the Motor City Madmouth Show next Wednesday. Have a good night. See you very shortly on the Sports Exchange. Salute to service and Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.